And I'm Brenda.
And welcome back to
Small Step Society.
This is episode 8, a discussion on diversity, part 1.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Before we begin this episode, we'd like to acknowledge the fact that there are many experiences that people witness and go through themselves. Our panel today is such a small subset of a larger, more diverse communities that make up the human population.
That being said, this episode isn't meant to be a source of general or objective information regarding everyone's or anyone's experiences with diversity. This panel is a tiny look into different perspectives from a variety of people that have come together as a community. We hope to foster a conversation with openness and maybe even put words to some of your experiences.
Keeping that in mind, please listen with an open mind and an open heart. On to the episode.
Today we have some special people on the podcast. Please welcome Daniel and Temmie as our first small stepping guests. Before we hear their perspective, let's get to know their music taste a little with our weekly segment, Song of the Moment.
Hey guys, I'm Daniel. I'm a senior here at Michigan. I study political science and French language with a minor in art history.
Wow.
What can I say?
Talented.
And my current song of the moment is We Are the People by Empire of the Sun.
Oh.
It's a great just to walk around campus and like a little beat to your step. It's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Love Empire.
I do that.
Good job.
Hi guys, my name is Temmie. I'm a sophomore studying neuroscience, and the song I was listening to was "Give Me More" by Britney Spears' mother. Partly because I am going as her for Halloween, so
Are you
I was trying
really?
to challenge. Yeah, so like
How
me and my
fun.
friends are doing each Britney, so I'm doing this "Slave for You." I think it's a song name. MTV Awards, so hence me channeling her.
Okay.
That is
That's
so
That's
good.
why I was listening. But
That's
also
so-
because like it's a bop. But
That's so method actor of you.
Thank you. I studied like how Jared Leto just like transforms completely for like acting. I'm
And
trying
that's
to
you.
do that.
For
Yeah,
Halloween.
that's
So
perfect.
fair. What was your song?
My song of the moment is Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo
Mm.
because it's just been hitting. I don't know. It's the weather, I think.
It's vampire weather.
It's vampire weather.
Well, it's like
weather.
Twilight right now. It's like rainy, it's
Mm.
dark,
It is
it's
Twilight
gloomy.
season.
I get
Yeah.
that. Nice. My song is Personally by Omar Apollo. Nobody wants to say
Omar?
anything about it.
Omar Apollo's really good. I
Tell me
don't know
more.
that song, but I
I've
know
been
he's
listening
really
to the album
talented.
Ivory. I think it's the one that blew up. I don't know.
Okay, then probably. I have a friend who likes him. So
Yeah. Fun
He's
stuff.
really good.
Okay, let's get into it. Yeah, so we were thinking that we could just start out by everyone kind of defining like what they identify with in terms of race and ethnicity. So who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Brenda.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm an Indian American, second generation. So my parents did immigrate from India, but I have grown up here my entire life, born here, born and raised, Texas.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Korean American. I'm 1.5 gen. So I was born in Korea. I grew up there until middle school. And then I moved here when I was in 5th grade, but middle school, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a white man. I am Jewish. I'm ethnically Jewish. So my family, we came over here in the early 1900s after escaping pogroms in Russia. And we've lived in New England and then now California ever since.
Low-key, I don't know how to explain it just because very culturally diverse and like nationalities and everything in my family, but I just identify as like being Canadian, but ethnically I'm Nigerian, so I guess like Nigerian, Canadian, but also I don't know, because it doesn't really encapsulate everything because I also have Brazilian culture and descent, and my mom's family is American, and then my dad's also Canadian, so yeah, just that all together. But I say I'm Canadian. So
Yeah. Okay, nice. I think that's just a good little background information so that everyone knows.
Yeah, and because we bring like American perspectives and like Canadian perspectives we don't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm really curious to like
Yeah.
hear how
Yeah.
that differs in Canada or it doesn't differ. I don't really know.
Yeah.
A little bit of both, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess our next question is, were conversations about race part of your upbringing? Because like in my personal experience, it wasn't necessarily like a conversation that was like a sit down conversation, but like obviously like ideals from my culture or like ways of thinking, how I was raised was part of my upbringing. And so I'd love to hear about how that affected your experience of growing up and like your childhood and how you see the world.
I think for me, like where I went to school and like where I was in Canada, it's very diverse. So I was around multiculturalism like 24/7. So it was just kind of a thing where I felt like everyone kind of had their own culture. So I was very much aware of like my Nigerian culture. You know, the church I went to, it was predominantly Nigerian, and you know, it was like family, friends, and everything. It was very strong in that. I think that also like maybe what differs with Canadians is that, you know, like even though you say you're Canadian when you're outside of Canada, when like this depends for each Canadian, but when you're in Canada, you say exactly what ethnicity, like what country or like what like where you're from. So like in Canada, I would just say, oh, someone asks me where I'm from, I'm like, oh, I'm Nigerian.
Oh,
Like you kind of say that. So I feel like with me, like like me being Nigerian has always been very like prevalent. Like I've always just felt very like that with when I'm in Canada, but it's different when I'm outside of it.
that's really interesting.
So, yeah.
Wait, so like whenever someone asks me like where I'm from, my automatic thing is to say American, and they were like, if they're like, no, where are you? Like what's your ancestry? I always feel like a little like, why are you asking that?
Yeah.
But is it just like natural to you?
It's more natural, I feel like, to me. I feel like people in Canada, when they ask that, they just mean like what ethnicity you are.
Yeah.
They don't mean like what your nationality is, because I feel like a majority of people are Canadian already, and since it's so multicultural, like you just assume like, oh, okay, like where are you like you know, where are you from? And most people like talk about like their ethnicity a lot more than I feel like their nationality too within Canada. Well, at least no, let me specify within like Ontario and like Greater Toronto area, it's different definitely in other places. But yeah, I mean, sometimes that question is a really like it can have some sort of like undertone to it. So it also depends on who's asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like.
That is interesting.
We've actually talked about that when I was in high school, like microaggressions. And it's just fascinating because, I mean, to hear how it is in Canada versus here, because there's definitely that microaggressive, like, undertone, I feel like, all the time here.
Yeah.
And how has your experience been with that?
With microaggression or just, like, growing up?
Honestly, both.
Honestly,
I'm sure there's some overlap there, maybe.
I will say I come from a very white town. Palo Alto, I mean, my family, we've lived there since the 60s, but it is like redlined. There's Palo Alto, and there's literally a separate town called East Palo Alto. And they've just become so segregated over time. But being Jewish, we did always have to talk a lot about race and race-based issues and allyship. So I'm from a very liberal sect of Judaism. I'm not trying to say that other sects of Judaism aren't. But we talked about this notion of Klal Yisrael, which is like including everybody. It's like opening up to the world. And so like that was like very prevalent, even in like an incredibly, like I went to Catholic school and I was the diversity in my grade because I was the Jewish kid.
Yeah.
Because everybody else was just like white and Catholic. So it's very different.
On that note,
Yes.
can I ask about
Yes.
how like your experiences were like growing up Jewish in a Catholic school?
It was weird. Going to Catholic school, I never quite fit in. We'd have chapel every week, and my school was great. Like it was a great opportunity. But during chapel every week, like everybody would go up and get communion, and I'd be the one person sitting down. And also I'd get like every once in a while some anti-Semitic jokes. I was like one of 2 Jewish kids in the grade, so that wasn't just me. But that didn't mean that there weren't some things thrown my way. And so it was a little bit of a differentiating thing. But then I realized it's not something to feel less than about.
Yeah.
And I always was really proud to be like the one Jewish kid there, or the one of 2 Jewish kids. I was
Yeah.
always like, this makes me kind of different, and I don't have to go shake an old priest's hand. And I really appreciated that.
So true. No, I guess related to that, I'm thinking, especially when there's so few of like the community you identify with, I guess, it can be really dividing because you kind of want to like fit in, and it can almost be competitive, like between. So like how, like what was the relationship between you and the other?
Can I tell you something about I'm not really proud about,
Yeah.
but I think it is really true,
Mhm.
is that to fit in, there is a big pressure to not be who you are.
Mhm.
And or not even to not be who you are and to shed that identity. The advantage, I guess, of being like white and Jewish is that I can pass, you
Mhm.
know? People don't see me and immediately assume I'm Jewish. But that being said, there's a lot of pressure to conform, and especially as a really young,
Yeah.
like 15-year-old that doesn't really like know how to fit in, like I think I embodied some of that anti-Semitism and let
Mhm.
myself be joked about
Yeah.
just to, you know, fit in. And that
Yeah.
and that is something that I'm not proud of. And I think
Mhm.
I, to a degree, am still feeling that now.
No, I understand that. When we were talking about, like, when we were talking about this episode,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were just so many conversations we had, but something that, like, really, I guess, stood out to me was my own experiences with, like, dealing with being, I guess, not white in a
Mm.
community. But it's really interesting because in Texas, like, I guess in Dallas, where I grew up, everyone's diverse. Like, they're honestly, like, white people were the minority in my schools and everything. But coming to Michigan, completely different. Like, to me, a lot of people are like, oh, Michigan's really, like, the University of Michigan's really diverse. But to me, I'm like, that is not diversity.
No.
Which, like, not to say anything about, like, UMich's DEI or anything like that, but just saying, like, from where I came from, it was very white to me. And so it's been really interesting, like, not being around people that are necessarily my race, because it's just so easy to do that in Dallas. But, like, trying to figure out, I guess, when I'm, like, masking my, like, Indian identity to fit in with, like, white people, or I guess non-Indian people, or vice versa, like, trying to, I guess, connect with other Indian people when I feel like I don't really have necessarily all of that culture, because I'm also, like, Indian American, you know what I mean? But it's very like, it can cause a lot of competition in your mind. I don't know.
Yeah. My mom always used to say, and I think this is not just applicable to Jewish people, but
Mhm.
it's like, are you an American Jew or a Jewish American?
Mhm.
And I think about that distinction a lot, especially with, I mean, at the time of this recording, like everything going on in
Mhm.
Israel, Palestine, like where do you fall? Like, are you an American Jew or are you a Jewish American?
Yeah.
And so that I feel like that rings true for a lot of identities.
Mhm. Yeah.
I would say off what you said, like coming to Michigan, because though like Toronto itself is very diverse, all the schools I've been to, like I've always been either like one of two like black students. In like my extracurriculars, I was always the only black girl. So I think coming here, I was like, wow, like this is so diverse.
Mhm.
But then hearing people like your experience, where it's like, no, this is like, well, the ratio just like, is so different
Yeah.
from what I'm used to. It's really crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I just
Mhm.
find that.
Yeah, I actually agree with that because I grew up in Korea, which is a very homogenous country, and I grew up in West Michigan, which is also very homogenous. So even though I was like in two different places growing up, like I never really experienced diversity. And when I came here, I remember thinking, wow, like there's so many like people who look different and like who look like me too. And then I remember having this conversation with Brenda and realizing that like it's not the experience that Brenda had like
It's completely different.
in grade
Yeah.
school, and I was like, that's just wild.
Which is so odd, because I feel like, I don't know, when I see like people, I guess, who would be considered, how do I put this? Like, people who would be considered diverse, quote unquote, like, which sounds really bad, but I guess you know what I mean. Like, I just expect to have like that kind of like solidarity, where I'm like we have to stick together, because like we shouldn't, like, we know what it's like to like not fit in, or like we know what it's like to be able to have that community. But I guess for you, like, maybe it wasn't like that because you grew up in such a not diverse community, like, all your life, even like no matter where you were.
Yeah. I feel like I was either Korean or like American.
Mm.
I mean, there were a couple of years where I was like, oh, I'm kind of like trying to fit both my cultures into one, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Still figuring it out, I think. Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's gonna take years.
No, it's honestly, it's really hard. Especially, I feel like I find it really hard to figure out what my identity is in America, because I feel like people see me and they assume I'm African American, which I do. I know a lot about African American culture just from like my mom's side and everything. But like, I'm not African American, and I don't experience the same experiences that they've been through, so I can't really go off that. But then like, I feel like the Nigerian and like African community is so small already here, so it's like very difficult to find that too. And I mean, it's hard to find your identity in a place where it's like, you know, like where are you leaning towards, and like I don't know, it's just really hard.
Yeah, in terms of like racial demography, like does Canada have a lot of black people, or is it just like where you grew up?
Honestly, okay, so if anyone is Canadian listening to this, like, this could be wrong, take it with a grain of salt. But from like my perspective and what I've seen and what I know, I would say that Canada as a whole does not have a lot of black people, but where there are black people, it's all in a very small, compact area, and that's like we call it the GTA, so it's the Greater Toronto area. So it's like you either live in Toronto or you live in these outskirts cities in it, and that's pretty much it. Like, and like also if I feel like if you're black in Canada, for the most part, you're either Caribbean or you're African. It's like either or for the most part. There's other people and everything, but I would say the majority. So, and I feel like everyone's just like in Toronto basically. So yeah, there's I mean the people who do like live in other provinces and are more like north and everything, their experiences are also completely different than someone who lives in a GTA, because like there's no black people like whatsoever. Like, I'm grateful that I have the multiculturalism of Toronto, but there's like nothing.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is very different.
Yeah, I asked that because like I know in America, like when we go, like when you're growing up in America, like in U.S. history and all of that, like we talk a lot about, probably a version of history that's not necessarily like completely accurate, but like we do cover like, like Black history and all of whatever that is in American history in classrooms, which I think probably differs around like state curriculums, depending where you live. But I was wondering like what that was like in Canada, like the education system.
So like we did have like, I remember maybe like once or twice in elementary school where we talked about Black history, but I felt like it wasn't very serious. And again, like in those schools, I was the only like Black student. So first of all, everyone just like look at me for like answers, which is like for me, like the Black history isn't my personal and family history. So it's like I don't even have answers. Like what are you looking at me for? So like there's nothing, for me, I couldn't relate to the history because it's not my experience nor my family's. But we did have it, and like in high school later on, they would like briefly go over it. But it was kind of more up to the Black students if they wanted to have something more about it, then you had to do it. Like basically,
you had to seek it out.
Yeah, you have to seek it out just because since like there isn't Black American culture, it's just like not the same. And like I feel like when you're in America, like there's Black people everywhere, which I love. I've never experienced like seeing so many Black people like in random places, all these places I go, and I love it because I'm like, this is so opposite. And I feel like because it's all over the States, it's like more prevalent, but because in Canada it's just like basically African Caribbean, and like you're in this one small area, it's just kind of like, I don't know, Black History Month isn't really, it's kind of more brushed over. I would say.
That's interesting.
It also just like breaks my heart that like people were like just looking at you for the answers just because of the way you look. Like
oh no, that reminded me, that's what I was gonna say. I have like such a vivid memory of being in like 6th grade social studies, and they were talking about like religions and just like really briefly going over it. And so they got to Hinduism, and they're starting to talk about like the caste system in India, which first of all is so outdated. And like I understand it's part of history, and it, it's always a question about history, like how much should you tell people because it's important and you don't want to repeat history's mistakes, but also like do you want to even teach the next generation about like all the violence and all the every bad thing that goes along with that. But anyway, so they were talking about the caste system, and the social studies teacher looks at me and she asked me something along the lines of like, what caste are you?
Oh my god.
And I was like,
No
I was so
way.
taken aback because I was like, I don't know, because I'm growing up in the 21st century. Like I shouldn't know, and I don't want to know, because it's not relevant.
And there's no right to ask that question.
Yeah.
To just
like,
assume that.
whatsoever.
It was really weird, but I like think about that a lot because it goes back to the thing where like I only identify with certain parts of my culture. And so it's also like when people come to me to ask about like Indian things, I'm like, I don't know the answer to that because of how, I guess, like I just have random pieces from Indian culture and random pieces from American culture. But it like brings up that thing where like when someone asks you about like your experiences and they look at you to be like the, I guess, Black person or the Indian person, it's so much pressure, and you feel like a certain way, and you feel like you have to like be in touch with that culture, and then you don't feel American or you don't feel Canadian.
I think it's really interesting because, like, as you were saying, it's like you're on the vanguard. Like, you are, like, everybody thinks that you're responsible for knowing it. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, you grew up in the way that you grew up, in whatever weird, unique way. and like you take from whatever you take. Like that's why like people will come up and ask me about like Jewish traditions. They thought when I was in high school, they thought it'd be funny to get like one of the international students to ask me about what circumcision was,
Oh my God.
which was just like also really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like how you were saying about like the teacher, like with asking about the caste system, like it's a completely different. But like I used to be, because I was like one of the two. I'd always be asked to perform like Hanukkah, like I'd do the candle lighting in front of everybody, or explain Jewish holidays, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I don't want to like talk about
Yeah.
this. But I'd have teachers that would be like, no, you can lead us in the Hebrew prayer, and I was like, I don't know Hebrew.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's like a difficult thing because you like also you almost are expected to feel grateful because they are like recognizing your culture.
yeah,
But it's also like you're doing it in such a weird way where like you're still singling them out.
mhm.
But it's really hard to navigate because I don't know how to feel.
Yeah, it's an inherently, like as you're saying, singling out, and it's uncomfortable. And I was also like, I'm not responsible for teaching these like 20 other pasty kids what I don't know, like what the prayer for breaking bread is like I'm not their teacher, you know.
Like the lesson should have a lesson. Like you're not a part of it. You don't need to be demonstrating doing nothing.
But it's also
Yeah.
with that where like think about it, if you were like growing up as like a white American, or you've been like even if you've just been growing up as someone like without like that separate culture, like you only have like that one culture that you need to focus on, not to say that it's necessarily easier, but like there's just less to focus on. Whereas when you're growing up with these two different cultures and you're trying to like figure out how to, I guess, combine them both and like take what parts you like from one culture from another, it can be so hard. And there's like double the information that you have to know and like double the information that you have to like, I guess, figure out. And
I feel like that kind of creates like this feeling of a double life.
Mhm.
I mean, I'd
Oh,
leave
yeah.
school to go to Hebrew school, and then I have like an entirely different group of friends
Mhm.
there, which, yeah. And so it's like, did you guys feel like you also had that like little bit of a double life?
I mean, I feel like that right now
Yeah.
because so like I was saying, like in Dallas there were so many Indian people, and so I feel like not in like a I only like Indian people type of way, but just because there were so many, like it was just easier to hang out with them in high school and middle school, whatever. So like all my friends back home are Indian, and then all my friends here, like I don't have any Indian friends here because they're just comparatively there's just less Indian people. And also I feel like it's almost like fun for me to like be experiencing so many new cultures because I did have the opportunity back then, but it was more comfortable to just stay in that like Indian bubble. But like, yeah, coming here, it's just weird. And then I do feel like I'm living a double life because I feel like here I'm not Indian. Like I don't participate in anything. Like I don't go to a temple because there's not anything close, you know? And like, yeah, it can be really weird. And I feel like especially on campus, like the only thing I can do to, I guess, connect with that Indian culture is like go to these like Indian like club events or something. But even then I feel weird because I feel like I'm not Indian enough to belong there. But I'm also like, I don't necessarily feel like not Indian or like white enough to be necessarily like hanging out and doing like all the like typical, I guess, not Indian people things. You know what I mean?
I totally.
Let's see.
I think we actually kind of briefly talked about this last night, where I kind of view myself as like I have like it's a circle, and that's me being Korean American, right? But being Korean is like the bigger circle, and there's like a littler circle inside is being American. We're like doing more non-Korean American stuff, just like the stereotypical white stuff, I guess, if you put it that way. And I feel like I have the capacity to just like push my Korean like bigger circle out, or like just focus on the smaller circle, so then I can like remove my Korean culture out when I'm talking to certain people or like doing certain things. But then I can also like go back in when I'm hanging out with Korean Americans where I'm teaching Koreans. Like, I don't know, it is kind of like a double life, I guess, but
It's, you know, the concept of like code switching.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like that kind of thing where it's not even like I don't do it consciously, like it's an involuntary thing. Like it just happens. I don't think about it until later. I'm like, I was definitely like I wanted to say some things, but I felt like it was weird because it's like not part of the culture of the people that I was talking to.
Yeah, I feel like I like change the way I am depending on the type of people I'm with, and it's kind of sad because like honestly, you should try to be your true self like as much as you can, even though it is hard. But I mean, like when I'm with my friends back home, I'm completely different than when I'm with my friends here. And then when I'm in like my African Student Association club, I feel like I'm a bit different. And like just when I'm in the States overall, I'm a bit different. Like I don't know, it's very weird, and it's like hard to kind of like find that like balance between like where you can just be yourself.
It's also especially weird, like I feel like when you do that so like subconsciously, and then like those groups come together.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's terrible. I'm like, I don't know how to act.
Yeah. And also I think with that, like because it's just subconscious, I feel like some people are like, oh, you're whitewashed, or like you don't have culture, and I just don't think it's quite true all the way.
Yeah, I've been called the term whitewash multiple times in my life, and like first of all, the whole term is like not even like correct. Like the term doesn't make sense itself, but it's really hurtful. I feel like when it's like, so like now because I'm not acting the way that you expect me to act, I just must be in a whole nother like way. I don't know.
No, and also I feel like that is internalized racism, because you're not acting white when you're doing that. They're telling you you're whitewashed when you're acting quote unquote American. And so the fact that they call it whitewash is just like, no, I'm American, and that doesn't mean I have to be white to be American. I can be whatever race I want. Not whatever race I want. I can be whatever race I am or whatever ethnicity I am, and like share
Still
that
be-
culture and
yeah.
still be American or still be Canadian, I guess.
And like still be you too. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to be what someone thinks or expects of you, to be honest.
Yeah. I just want to say that race, guys, is a social construct.
Yeah.
It
Believe
is
it
a
or
social
not,
construct.
it is.
We learned all about it.
Well, and it's crazy because it's like so many of there are like expectations that even before you meet somebody that they load onto you, like in just like little interactions. And I think it's very hard, especially coming to Michigan. I think is a catalyst for so many people to find so many different aspects of their identity. Not only the traditional college way of you're like 18 and we've booted you out of home and now you have to figure out who you are. But it's like, who are you? Like, what actual parts of your identity matter to you? And that's hard and it's scary. And like the reason why I asked about the double life is like it can feel really real. And some people struggle with it in college. And like how to merge and bring different groups together. Some people just stick to one. Some people try to mix both.
Yeah.
It's so real.
Yeah. I guess with the double life and like, I guess consciously and subconsciously acting a certain way to fit in, or I guess just to feel like you're part of a group. Do you guys know of a moment in your lives, I guess, where you've had to purposely like act in a different way to avoid stereotypes of whatever race or ethnicity you identify with? And if so, do you want to talk about it?
I can definitely think of a few times. There's a lot of moments where I'm like very hesitant to tell people I'm Jewish. That are like I really try to hide it because it's scary. I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes associated with like being Jewish, and I've gotten probably a lot of them. And it's there's specific moments such as like meeting new people for the first time when I'm from California, I'm from the Bay Area. I live in a bubble where it feels safe and I can tell people I'm Jewish, but I recognize I can't always do that across the United States. And it's not always a welcome thing to say that you're Jewish. And there have been moments where it's like people will like ask me like, do you wear the skull cap? Like, do you collect pennies? Like the little things.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely moments, and I think it's like a case by case. Like I can give you like the example of like the Uber driver that I'm pretty sure is a Christian nationalist, or like being in Catholic school. So it really depends. But sometimes it feels safer to not bring it up.
And is it like is it a conscious decision, or is it just like something that happens and then later you're like, I don't know why I did that?
It's a mix of both. I feel like sometimes it's really conscious when it's like, I really shouldn't talk about this with these people. Or it's like, I feel like they would treat me very differently if they actually knew I was Jewish.
Which is the worst feeling.
Which is scary.
So
And like, it's a privilege that I can like be able to like hide that, you know? I mean, it shouldn't be, but like I drove across America this summer. I drove from San Francisco here, which was really fun.
Wow.
But
Okay.
driving through the country can
Mm.
sometimes be really scary, especially because like there's that association with like the Jewish elite, or like even wearing something liberal and it's like that liberal Jewish. And it's just like,
Mhm.
and then like all the stereotypes cascade from there. So I like try to be more careful with it when I'm not at home, and like when I can talk to somebody about being Jewish that I'm comfortable with, like I give it a little while before telling somebody I'm Jewish.
Yeah, but I also like as we've gotten to know each other more, like I
Yeah.
feel like I get to hear more about it, and it's just interesting to me. But I also like that I don't have to ask about it, you know? Like if I'm
Mm.
curious, like I just because that's so weird to do, you know what I mean? But I like just getting to know like different parts of culture that I just didn't know about because yeah, like all that's publicized is like all these weird stereotypes that are just so messed up.
I hate to say this, but like some of them are genuinely like I think like some of them get so abstract and dumb and
Yeah.
stupid that they don't make sense. And like the Jewish space laser, like you guys know about the Jewish space laser?
No.
So there's a
do we want to do we want to teach people about it?
well, so there's not actually a Jewish space laser, as a disclaimer, but there is a representative from Georgia in the House of Representatives who cited a Jewish space laser as like a huge threat to U.S. national security. Makes no sense. Absolutely disgusting. And it was just anti-Semitic, like at its core. But it gets so ridiculous that it's like to a certain point, it's like, what do these people believe? And kind of tying us back to college and being here is like one of the things I love about being in college is being able to learn about different people and different cultures and also see like the different clubs on campus and how they interact.
Yeah.
I'm really proud that like the Hillel that I don't really go to, they invite everybody to come and join for Shabbat. And it's like, it's not an exclusive thing. And that's what like college is all about, is being inclusive.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people miss that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mine's just like a more generic. I feel like a lot of people go through this. It's the whole lunchbox example.
What's the lunchbox example?
So when you're in grade school, like you pack a lunch, right?
Yeah.
And like when I first moved here in 5th grade, I would pack like kimbap and like kimchi fried rice and like food that I ate at home, right? But then I bring it to school and they'd be like, "Oh, what is that?" I'm like, "Oh, that smells." Where like there was one time where my friend had brought a tuna sandwich. And I was like, oh, like tuna sandwiches are accepted here, right?
yeah.
So then like a week later, I bring in a tuna sandwich, and they're like, your food smells. And I was like, okay, so like that's just racism.
Yeah, because you didn't
Yeah.
the other person.
Yeah, and I think ever since then, like I would ask my mom to pack me a peanut butter jelly because I didn't want to stand out in that way. You know what I mean? And I think it's something that a lot of people go through. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like a very generic
Yeah.
experience.
No,
I think.
It might be generic, quote unquote, but that kind of stuff when you're a child, like that hurts,
Yeah.
like that. Like you remember that, and it's so painful. I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up around a lot of Indian people, but even then, like, I feel like I was the one like getting the most Indian food to school, if that makes sense. Like they didn't really do like they were doing more of like the PB&J, like that kind of route, and I wouldn't. And then like I'd go home and tell my mom that, and she'd be like, "No, like that, like this is what we eat in our house, and like you shouldn't be eating something else just because other people are eating it. Like if they look at you weird, fine."
Yeah.
Which I mean is like it's such a good thing to like look back on now and be like, yeah, I was just eating the food that I was eating because honestly it's better.
Yeah.
It's better.
Yeah, because like I'd come back from camp where summer, like a school camp where you're eating like mashed potatoes, spaghetti or whatever, and then I'd come home and like demand Korean food.
Mm.
No.
So like it wasn't that I wanted to eat like American food. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like I don't know.
You felt like you had to fit the norm of just
Right,
eating
right.
what everyone else.
No, I mean like going home now, like I got tired of Indian food. Like I'll just say it, like because I ate it for my entire life.
Yeah.
But like going home now, like I appreciate it so much more. Like
Mhm.
when I can finally get Indian food, or like even when we go out to get Indian food, like at a restaurant. Oh my gosh, it's the best time
Mhm.
because we have it. Like I have it so less now
Mhm.
that I like really value that culture, I guess.
And a lot of like culture is like connected with food, so I feel like when you eat here, so you feel home, you feel like comfortable,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
food, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
About like the what is it called?
Stereotype.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everything. I feel like there's plenty of times I've code switched. Like honestly, probably my whole life, even before I even knew it was like
Yeah.
called code switching. because I feel like since I was like a child, I always just thought like I'm already like Black, and then I'm also a woman. So like things already is gonna be like first of all, visible minority. So it's like there's no like hiding it there. Everything I already know. There's certain things I'm just gonna have to like work extra hard for or experience that I just know is kind of like a given. And I feel like it's a terrible thing, you know, to have to like deal with that. But there's so many environments, and probably the majority of environments where I just don't feel comfortable being my entire self, because I don't want to be portrayed like be connected with stereotypes that people have of like either Black people or Black women or just African people, and I just don't want to be connected to that, because a lot of them are just so negative and not even true. So I feel like in majority of settings, even till today, I'm still kind of code switching just so that I make sure that first of all I'm given like the same opportunities, but then also so that I don't, you know, like go through like, you know, something bad doesn't happen, or like, you know, kind of way to like, I guess, like protect yourself, like so that you're not vulnerable to experience those like really bad experiences.
Yeah. And like the way you said that, it kind of made me think about like, I don't think I've ever experienced like blatant racism. Like I've definitely experienced racist things and like people saying racist things and like anyway, but like not anything like what someone would consider like major or like it wasn't like a life-changing event or anything, but because of how much you hear about it, like you just feel the need to like protect yourself even if you haven't experienced it yourself, which is so messed up, because like you could be in an environment that is safe but you still don't feel safe there because of like how much your culture is like looked down on, or your culture is opposed by other people. Yeah. So something about what you said reminded me, like even to do with, I guess, what I'm studying in college. To preface, went to high school where I was doing hardcore math, like the most advanced calculus, science, engineering. It was a science and engineering school. So very advanced stuff. And then I came here. I'm a psychology major. But I remember like, well, you know, like AI is just growing so much in the world, and computer science is such a like valued skill, and I mean, that makes sense. But I feel like everyone knows this, like the stereotype about Indian people where they're all like IT people. Like, you're having trouble with your computer? Ask an Indian person. Which, okay, I could talk about that. But my point being, so my parents were like, oh, like maybe you should like minor in computer science or like study computer science, like take some classes. But like, this is the part that I don't know that I'll ever get over. Like, I am so anti like me studying computer science or even being into it, because I don't want to fit into that stereotype, and I want to be different from Indian people, which like goes back to my point about like the competitiveness. Because like I just can't, I guess, like take that out of my system where I want to be different from other Indian people, but not because I don't want to be Indian, because I don't want to, I guess, like give into that stereotype or like, you know, like feed into that. But it sucks.
I feel like that's so real though. I mean, like there is always that pressure, and it's like that inner fight like between the two sides within yourself. I remember like when I applied to college all those years ago, I applied to Brandeis, which is like the Jewish school. And I got in, and I was like, great, like this is awesome. But then I was like, I can't go. I can't be the Jewish kid that goes to Brandeis. That story's been done billions of times. But then I was like, well, what does that mean? Because then where am I going to go? But I was like, all I know is I can't be another stereotypical Jewish kid that went to Brandeis.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things, because, you know, like if you were the first Jewish American person to do something, I don't really know. But like, you know, like they put that in the headline, like they'd say like the first Jewish American, or like for me they put like the first Indian American woman or whatever. And so it's like one of the things where when you look at the headline, you're like, oh wow, like they're paving the way for Jewish people. They're paving the way for Indian people. So it's almost like a good thing to be like the person who is not following that stereotype. But it makes you wonder like why. First of all, why is that even in the headline? But second of all, like, are they like, how do I even put this? Like, are they doing that thing because they actually loved it, or because they loved it and they wanted to like compete, like almost compete with their race, like not do what everyone else was doing simply because they didn't want to do that stereotypical thing? I don't know. It's just like I always see those headlines and I'm like, interesting.
Yeah. I think it's also like an interesting point is like how much do we also like see these roles that we're given by like these stereotypes, and we go about fitting in them. You know, like how do we actually confirm that? Like I come from a few generations of lawyers, and like I knew somebody in my earlier years that was like Jewish lawyers in New York, and I was like, well, that's a stereotype. And the thing is, like, my family actually lived that. And so it's like, what I'm trying to say is that confirmation bias after hearing so many of those stereotypes.
Both my parents, computer science people.
Mm.
Yeah. On the topic of family and like the confirmation bias thing, how do you think you've had to deal with generational racism? See, this is the part where I feel like I'm going to say something bad about Indian American people, or like, but it's just about like, you know, like people, especially like being second generation, like your parents come to the U.S. because of the opportunity, and but then they like come here and they realize like it's not all that. Like there's so much more that you have to deal with. But like part of generational racism is like they look at American people and they're like, these people live like these weird like these weird lives, you know what I mean? Like they have access to so many things, and like American people seem really ungrateful. So I think that's part of it, like at least in my culture, like looking at people who are not Indian or like white people and thinking, why is this what they care about? You know what I mean? Especially, okay, I'll give an example. So like Indian culture is very which is I guess a stereotype, but like Indian culture just naturally is very like academically focused. And you know, like Americans are like very like participation trophy oriented, like that's a thing, which I understand like is positive reinforcement. I get that. But Indian people, like at least in my experience, like my culture, like my family isn't really like that. And so in that sense, it was like a racism thing where they'd look at like white people and be like, what's going on there? You know what I mean? And so like I feel like I was kind of conditioned to look at white people and think they're not trying, like they're just getting awards without deserving them. And it was like this really, and like growing up then I think about it, I'm like, it's such a weird thought to have because like even in my mind, like we were divided, like I was divided from like white people. Like it was like a racist thought, except people don't really think about being racist towards white people, which that's a different topic, which I could go into, but you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a thought, but I don't know if it really connects to generational racism, but I think in Korea we have this like white savior mindset because they helped us in the Korean War, and like they helped us become the modern day Korea we are. And I think when white people enjoy Korean food, we're like, they're making kimchi, we celebrate it so much. We're like, oh my goodness, like I don't know, is that generational racism, or is that just like thoughts that are like passed on from generation to generation?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what like that really referred to more like the generational part of it, like just generational, I guess, thoughts and like ideals about race. But that's so funny that you say that, because I feel like for us it's the opposite, because I mean I don't know about American Indian relationships, but like the British people colonized India. So in case you guys didn't know, British people are white. But yeah, so like
Shocker.
because of that, it's like the opposite of that, where which is funny because like chicken tikka masala, Indian dish, kind of is like the national dish of Great Britain, crazy. But yeah, like at least in my family, like Indian people like look at white people and they're like, oh, like they're not celebrating our food properly, or like they're not celebrating our culture properly. Oh, chicken tikka masala is the national dish. Yeah, of course it is, because they colonized us and took it, you know? Like for you it feels like they're celebrating it maybe, but like for us it's like they took it away from us. Like that's supposed to be our thing, which like then when you talk about like the broader thing about racism, like divisions, it shouldn't be like a take, and it shouldn't be like they're giving us the opportunity to like be recognized as Korean. I don't know.
I mean, from my culture and everything, I feel like, well, like Nigerian culture specifically, it's more similar to like the Korean American experience, or Korea, how like England or Britain like colonized Nigeria, and I feel like the more British you are as Nigerian, like the higher and like the more opportunities and like the better you are. And it's like when like I feel like, I don't know how to put this in a way, but it's like kind of like Nigerians are very competitive, and like you just want to be the best in like everything that you do. And I feel like so like the more Britain like or England like that you are, it's like the more successful and like the better opportunities is everything you are gonna like experience.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, like I remember when I applied in college, it's like I just wanted to go to Britain. Like I just wanted to go to college in like the UK. And my mom was like, no, because Indian people, like they go to the UK to get that education. You're in America, like that's what you should be doing. So it's like kind of the same thing where it's like you can like if you're going somewhere else from America and you're Indian, like you're going back, like you're like
Because
doing worse.
America's like the goal.
It's
like
the place, yeah.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cultures, like America is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to come here, like, you know, to study and to like get a job and live and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Well-
it does have a lot of opportunities that a lot of countries can't offer.
Yeah. But then like from my perspective, because I've seen like both, I guess, like my parents like struggling with like, well, not even struggling, like just their perspective on American, like coming here as opportunity and then realizing like it's not all that. And then my experience just growing up in America, we like, so I have a friend that's international and he like looks at America as like the greatest thing. And he's like, I want to get my like visa. I want to stay here. Like, and I'm like, I want to leave. You know what I mean? But it's just so interesting because like to even like think about that perspective, like as someone immigrating into the US, like America is like the greatest thing. And like the racism is like worth it almost. But then once you're growing up here, like you do like kind of, you are kind of ungrateful for what you do have because it also comes with such a cost. And it's a cost that you've had to bear your entire life. Whereas maybe for like people coming in, they haven't. And of course they've had their own struggles and there's definitely very valid.
Like I would say for me, like choosing to, you know, move to the States and like come to school here, like honestly, like school does just seem so much better here, at least from my perspective. It really does. And because I think of like the job opportunities and like just things that I can get here that I can't get like elsewhere. But yeah, I think, I mean, it's easy to romanticize America overall. I think not until you live here, then you do experiences like the bread end of a stick, which every country has. Like, you know, there's those things that non-negotiables, I guess. But I mean, sometimes it's like it is worth it, I guess, in the mindset, you know, that like you do come to a place where like you have more opportunities and everything.
On the topic of that, my mom and I talk about this quite often, is that I did try hard in like high school to get to Michigan, right? But I didn't have to try nearly as hard as my relatives in Korea who wanted to get into like the top school in Korea. And then you like compare it with UMich, which UMich is not the top school in the United States, right? It's a really good school, but it's not the top 10 where like top
it's not
5.
an Ivy League.
Yeah, but like in Korea, the top 3 is still so much like ranked lower comparatively to the University of Michigan that like my parents are just like, you should be grateful because you didn't even have to try as hard and you got into a school that's just comparatively better. And like if you were in Korea, if you had tried the same, like you just simply wouldn't have had this opportunity, which is true to a certain sense, like but just kind of like with the opportunity and like moving to America and stuff.
When you bring up like the whole college application process, that like just sparks the whole conversation about affirmative action and
Oh yeah.
how, I don't even know if we want to talk about this, but like how different races view it, especially because like for me, I'm like a majority in terms of application process. Like I'm not seen as a minority in applications because I'm just Asian. And like Asian people aren't necessarily favored by, well, I don't, right? Yeah. Like Asian people aren't really favored by the affirmative action process. And so there's a lot of like Indian people, especially because Indian people are like, well, we're not Asian. Like it's our own subcontinent. Like we should be classified as something different. And then, which I don't know if that would make us minority, but whatever. And so a lot of Indian people don't like affirmative action because they feel like they're getting an opportunity taken away from them by other like races. And it's just really interesting to look at because it's like, okay, but what if you were classified as Indian, then you suddenly like, yeah, affirmative action is helping them, but like if you had to be in that position, like you would want affirmative action too because it's just giving them a fair opportunity. And it's just weird because like once you're in that boat, like you completely forget about the other's perspective until like you're faced with the racism and like you're faced with the lack of opportunity, and then you want it so badly, and then you're like, why don't people understand? But it's just interesting to like come at it from like the perspective of being like a minority but also majority in terms of college admissions, and having that thought where you're like, why don't I get favored by that application process? This is so unfair. Like why am I not getting this opportunity?
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think my family has historically always been really in favor of affirmative action because we see it as very restorative. I mean, my grandfather like went to college and he got in because of like the Jewish quota. Because it was like the 1950s, and so it was always this like question of like we should like let people in. It was very messed up like how he was let in, but it's like we should have a restorative means to open up education. Like if we want to talk, this is a whole different
I know.
branch, but it's like if we also want to talk about it, like I talk about the SAT, talk about the College Board, talk about like access to tutoring, talk about like educational means, like it all builds into that, and like affirmative action is one step.
No, I mean I feel like I find some way to like bring up how much I hate the SAT
Yeah.
in every single episode somehow. But yeah, like when it comes to like standardized testing, that's not standardized. Like there's so many opportunities that like people just don't get because they're not like the majority, and
And it's not like it's not entirely a race thing. It's more like a socioeconomic thing.
yeah, which is like tied into race, and then it's also not because it's not like a direct relation, and so people aren't able to see that, especially when like, I mean, it's such a difficult conversation to have and like complain about because, I mean, there's just so much that needs to be done before that, but also it should still be fixed.
Yeah.
But it's like how does that even happen? Like how does anyone even like begin to go about that? So guys, we've had a little off-camera conversation, but we got into a really interesting conversation about model minorities and what that means. So I guess somehow let's just like get into it because it was really interesting and just, I mean, such good points were made.
Not even just model minority, but like how certain stereotypes are turned to be like a positive thing.
Yeah.
And like kind of masked to
Like be an
benefit
opportunity.
you,
Yeah.
I used to be in an anthropology class, like earlier in college, and it's like we talked about memes, and it was like, well, what do they actually mean? Like, what's the deeper service? And I what I'm getting to is like we always talked about that meme of it's like the few minorities that get on the brochure for campus,
my gosh.
or like that you get hunted around campus. And I was wondering, like, do you guys find that that's pretty true?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay, mine too. Okay, I went to a private Christian school, and I was very much one of the few Black people there, and like I was also heavily involved in like every single club. So it was like if they weren't asking me to either speak at a chapel or speak or like do something or like be on the Instagram, like I would be on it. And like there were some positions that I had a question of whether I got it because generally I deserved it or just because they need they need diversity.
Really?
Yeah, and like they would always just like message me like, oh, can you like do a video for our Instagram? Can you like do this? Yeah. And I was always down for it because I was like, you know, it's an opportunity. Yeah. Like either way, like I'd rather run this. Like I'd rather be on the cover. Like that's good. It can benefit me, but also it was very much like, like it's a it
There's
feels
like
like
an underlying reason
exactly,
for it.
and like I don't want something to be given to me just because. Yeah.
Not to get controversial, but I hate Jewish stereotypes.
That's fair.
Like, I mean, everybody, like, it's just, like, it feels weird to have something put on you.
Yeah.
And, like, they're pesky. Can I swear? Or no? Okay. They're pesky little pests.
So true.
There are some people, I've heard this story, but, like, people go to college and they're, like, surprised that Jewish students don't have horns. And it was, like...
What? Oh.
And it's, like, they genuinely don't have them. And I was, like... We're the same species.
We're Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
What?
They like apparently I heard this story from a friend that's like they got their hair checked to see if there's like little like budding horns.
Genuinely?
Like, on the other side.
Genuinely.
If you're looking at the camera, it's like right here.
Wait, genuinely?
Yeah, genuinely.
That's insane.
So it's like, but it's like you see like they can get so ridiculous.
The indoctrination of poor American kids. They don't know any better.
They just don't.
But
know
they
anything.
should. They
and
really
honestly,
should.
like I have not like seen myself seen so much anti-Semitism until I've gotten to the States. Genuinely, and I knew it was a very big issue, but I've not seen it with my own eyes as much until I got here.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what fuels it. Like,
are there a lot of Jewish people in Canada?
I don't
Does
think.
anyone know? I don't know.
I don't want to speak because
I mean,
I can't say, but I would say there is like a Jewish community in Toronto itself.
Okay.
Like within like there's like the communities kind of like similar to New York, I would say, where it's like very much like heavily populated in like Toronto.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of like Canada or like Ontario. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I just like, well, America to us, when you guys were talking about like what does America mean to your family, America to my family was like, oh, this is like the one place that like besides Israel that's like safe for Jewish people. It's
Yeah.
like, well, that's funny.
Yeah.
Because neither place is safe.
Because
Yeah.
neither place
Yeah.
is safe.
But it's also funny because when I think about racism, I'm like, yeah, it's an American thing.
But that's not true.
I know it's
It's a
not.
global
Yeah.
Well, I will
thing.
say American racism is so different
It's a different
from
breed.
Canadian racism and then like European racism from what I've
Yeah.
experienced.
But
Like
it's
so different.
That's fascinating.
it's funny because like I feel like European,
Terrifying.
at least from what I know, from what I know about European racism, it's almost like normal. Like it's just part of the culture.
Yeah.
But
it's very
Americans-
blunt, I feel like.
Yeah, but American is like it's part of the culture, but like we talk about it a lot, so it shouldn't be. But then like also the conversation about racism is like kind of a joke to so many people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never talked about racism more than just being in America.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's not.
And we
like,
just
it's
added
ev-
like
it's
2
like
hours
everyday.
to that total.
No, it's just very weird because I feel like a lot of things, like not to be like the person, oh, like make about race or everything, but a lot of conversations in class, outside of class, and everything does circle around racism.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
feel like in the States, like racism is very much built into so many different systems, which is why it's like every single day
Yeah.
you're talking about it because you're just every single day. It's like you see it constantly. Whereas I feel like in Canada, at least for like, no, it is built into like some of this, like the systematic racism in Canada, but it's not an everyday conversation.
Mhm.
And like, I feel like the racism is like kind of like sugar coated. So it's
Mm.
like
Yeah.
you could have you questioning whether it was racism or if you were just, you know,
You're just
today.
reading too much
yeah,
into it.
it'll be very much like hidden and like it's like the way that people's tone, their
Yeah.
attitude, their body language. Whereas I feel like it's more like, I don't know, not like very. It's like very upfront.
Yeah.
more, I feel like.
But
what
also
I've
with that, like,
experienced.
because of like not knowing whether you're reading into things or like if they're just being racist, like that can be so invalidating to your feelings.
Oh yeah.
Because you're like, am I supposed to be feeling this way, or am I being racist? Like, am
Mhm.
I the one who's like thinking about race too much?
There was like
Mm.
multiple times in high school where I couldn't tell if like in school, like not even just not students honestly, but more like faculty and things, where like I was like are they literally just being racist to me? And people would tell me yes they are. Some people would be like no they're not.
Mhm.
And it's kind of
Mm.
like am I like what is the answer?
Yeah, and,
What's
like,
going on?
I mean, that goes back to the thing about race being a social construct. You don't know whether they're being racist because what is race? You know, like what does it mean to be racist? Are you being racist, or are you just like being culturally aware?
Yeah, but I also like to play devil's advocate because America talks about it, and like there are so many people who are trying to fix this whole racism thing. Like I think that's why it's just a bigger deal versus like you said in European culture is just
It's
part of
yeah.
it, and like
Mm.
it's no one's
that's
doing
not
anything about
great
it.
either. Like
Yeah.
you don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's why in certain senses people are like, oh, America's the place to be because there at least there are people who are trying to fix it, even though it is very prominent. But like
Yeah, I mean, it's like like when people talk about like whether, like there's the question of whether people should even, or like, okay, let me backtrack. There's a question of whether in history, like American history, or I guess world history, whether they should even like teach about what Nazism was and like what their ideals were, because then you're like
kind of
teaching, you're spreading
yeah.
it. And so I feel like the same way where in America, they're like teaching people about racism so that it doesn't happen because they're trying to fix it, but also like you're doing the complete opposite of that at the same time. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the thing where like, how do you even go about it? Nobody knows.
I think that's like such a fascinating like little thing to explore because it's like it's really complicated. Like how do you teach these? But I think the scariest thing is that like a lot of the people that at least in my experience, and I'm only talking about mine, like they don't get like the stereotypes just from school. Like they get it from home. So it's like whether or not you change the curriculum, like
Yeah.
they're getting it, they're bringing it to school.
Yeah.
So
And then it's like, you might as well. Like,
and
you-
then it's like and
you
then
should teach about it.
but then you teach about it so you can deconstruct that. But then you have the teachers who are also ingrained in it. I had a French teacher in my high school that was reading Mein Kampf one day,
No way.
and I was like, why? It was like, what are you? Did you not enjoy it the first time? like, what are you doing? So it's just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like how do we remove people's personal biases like when it comes to like teaching people about history and all that because like like you feel when like someone has an opinion you feel it if they're trying to
Is she?
Oh, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, with like War II movies and all of that, it's like all of that history and all of like the racism. I mean, like any like historical movie, like it almost gets romanticized.
Ugh.
Where, especially if you're like removed from it, like I didn't really grow up around like Jewish people that much. Like there just aren't. Well, from what I know, I guess where I lived. Like there weren't that many people, and
There's
so
not
like
many of us.
yeah.
Sorry, not to get sad, but continue.
Yeah, but with that, it's like really romanticized, and when you're so far removed from it, it's just like a story that happened, and you move on, and it's just like something that happened, and then you like actually meet someone who like had personal ties to that, or like it actually hits home for them, and you're like, wait, this is a real thing. Like this is not like something that like people should joke about, and like it's not like something like, oh, like for fun, I'm just gonna like watch. I'm just gonna like learn more about Nazism. You know what I mean?
I think it's interesting because it's like so much of it becomes academic
Mm-hmm.
that like, and that's what like I feel like we talk about this a lot in like Jewish circles is like what happens when like the Holocaust survivors aren't here anymore,
Yeah.
because then it becomes like
A story.
something
It's
that
a
you can
legend.
close a book on, like, but that's not the case. And it's like you mentioned earlier, it's like, do we teach history because we want to avoid it repeating itself, or do we accidentally cause it to repeat?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's a mixture of both. And I don't know.
Do we want to go back to the model minority, or should we put a pin in it and bring it back next time?
I would definitely love to. I mean, I would love to talk about it now, but at the same time, I would also love to come
Yeah.
back and talk about it with you guys more, because I think it's something that like I feel like we talked a lot about negative stereotypes, but it's like positive stereotypes are a whole nother
That's not another
devil.
episode, yeah.
But that's, I mean, it's not exciting, but like I'm excited to discuss it with you guys.
No, like these are really, I love having these conversations. Because
And like we totally went off script, which is really good
Yeah.
because that just meant we facilitated really like authentic conversation, which was good. So
they're real thoughts and real experiences.
and it like built upon everyone. Like I don't know, it was really cool.
Yeah.
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 Thank you guys so much for having us.
Oh my
Thank
gosh,
you
thank
for
you.
like, agreeing to join us.
No, it's amazing.
This is amazing.
Yeah. No, we
It's lovely to
definitely.
hear your experience.
Thank you. No, yours too. I learned so much.
Yeah, no,
honestly.
we chose her, I guess, for sure.
Yes.
Like we know. Good conversation, good
Mhm.
discussion, good points.
Hell yeah.
Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
and it was
you.
so great hearing all your experiences and all your perspectives because we do not have them and you can't learn if you don't hear about it.
Yeah.
So
And maybe they'll be back soon.
hopefully, knock on wood.
Hopefully. Good conversation. Oh my gosh. My heart's like fulfilled,
I know.
but I also want to talk about it so much more.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so for our listeners, I feel really awkward doing this. You can find the video version of us on YouTube. You can find the audio version of us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you can find podcasts except where you can't. Episodes every Sunday. Follow us on
Follow us.
Instagram
Yes.
at Small Step Society Pod. And I think that's all, right? Yeah. With that, hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.
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 Please subscribe.
Yeah.